we're going to talk about Jeffrey Dahmer. So, on Tuesday, I have a special guest coming where we're really going to deep dive into Dahmer, and we're going to talk about the new Netflix documentary. If you haven't seen it, you must be living under a rock because everybody's talking about it. And if you don't know who Jeffrey Dahmer is, well, I am here to fill you in, but most people probably know who he is, or you have an idea of who he is because he's been an influence in even pop culture throughout the years, and they name him in songs, everything. So there's been actually a few movies made after him, one of the most notable being Silence of the Lambs. This Netflix documentary, Evan Peters plays him, and he does a great job. And if you don't know who Evan Peters is, check out American Horror Story. He's in that, and he is awesome, and I really hope he wins an award for this because he is great. I mean, he does such a good job. My heart was racing the entire time I watched this show. So let's go over who Jeffrey Dahmer is and what is so crazy about this guy. Jeffrey Dahmer was a serial killer between 1978 and 1991. He murdered and dismembered at least 17 different men between then. His later murders involved, I don't know if I can say this word on YouTube, doing nasty things with dead bodies, cannibalism, like eating his victims, and he would preserve body parts. In his home, he would like bleach the bones and stuff. He would obsess with like keeping them. If you didn't know this, there's actually a lot of serial killers who had urges to kill due to brain damage, and Jeffrey Dahmer was one of them. I actually watched this great documentary you should check out. It's called Crazy Not Insane, about this woman who did a lot of brain scans on different people and different serial killers, and there was a lot of serial killers who had prefrontal cortex damage, which is an area of your brain that controls impulses. And Jeffrey Dahmer might have had brain damage due to a surgery when he was just a kid. He was under anesthesia too long, and they believe that it had caused some brain damage to him. As a child, Dahmer was obsessed with animal bones and roadkill. At a really early age, him and his dad would go around collecting roadkill and dissecting it. His dad said that he had encouraged him to do this because he finally found something that he was into, and his dad was actually a chemist, so it was exciting for him because he was into science and stuff like that. So I guess they thought it was pretty cool, and they found bonding over it, and they would dissect the animals and preserve the bones and stuff, and Jeffrey would actually play with the bones, calling them fiddlesticks. His MO, which is it's called a modus operandi, is like a killer signature. A lot of serial killers have a signature, like a way of doing things that they do with every victim, like the Zodiac. His modus operandi was shooting lovers on Lover's Lane, things like that. They have a certain way about going about their killings, which is their modus operandi. Jeffrey Dahmer's, he would offer his victims money to take pictures. Like he would say, like, do you want to come model some photos for me? Then he would drug his victims. They were all men. Jeffrey Dahmer was a homosexual, and he would seek out homosexual men or even some straight men that he found attractive or that he was into. He would drug them, he would kill them, and then he would take photos of the dismembering process as well. So his first victim, Stephen Hicks, he killed in his family home right after graduating high school and hid him in his crawl space. So right after he had graduated high school, his father had already left because him and his mother had divorced, and his mother had moved out of the house, and he had the summer to himself at the house. That's when he got this guy, Stephen Hicks, and lured him to his home and killed him, then put him in the crawl space and, cut him up. And I believe he tried to dump his bones in the dump, and he got caught by a cop, but the cop didn't know the bones were there. He said he was just taking trash to the dump, and he got spooked, so he brought the bones back, and then ended up pulverizing the bones and spreading them all over. After that, he went into the army for a while. He was doing very well for a little bit. He was a medic. He was stationed in Germany, and then his drinking got to be really bad, and he was discharged. They basically had a meeting and said, hey man, we'll give you a plane ticket and you can go wherever you want. And he went to Miami for a little bit, and then he ran out of money and had nowhere to stay, and then he moved in with his grandma. At his grandma, this is about 10 years later now, a lot of time has passed, he kills his next victim, Stephen Tiomi, in his grandma's house. In his grandma's, I think it's called a fruit cellar, they said. He killed his next victim in the fruit cellar. And then he would go on to kill 2 more men in his grandma's house before his grandma kicked him out for having men over and his drinking habits. Then he moved into his own apartment, where his killings had definitely escalated. They started happening more often, and they became more gruesome, I suppose because he had nobody to worry about and could do whatever he wanted. His apartment had stunk so bad from putting his victim, so he bought this 57-gallon tub that he put hydrochloric acid in, and he would put, torsos and things in there so that it would deteriorate the flesh and he could keep the bones, because he wanted to keep these bones to build an altar. He plans to make this big altar made out of bones that he could sit in front of. There were several complaints from his apartment building. They were always saying how much it stunk. They went to him and said, hey man, this is really bad. He told him that his freezer had broken. He had a bunch of meat in there. And then the second time I told them that his tropical fish had died. He got away with that. And then his killings got even worse. He was he basically would kill his victims and put them in a bathtub and dismember them in the bathtub and then save certain parts. Then he started saving their hearts, parts of their heart, their thigh, and a few other parts that he would actually eat because he felt that it made him become one with his victim. He started doing terribly gross things like drilling holes in some of his victims' heads and pouring in hydrochloric acid and boiling water. It just, seemed to get worse and worse until finally one night he meets this guy, Tracy Edwards. And he tries to handcuff him, but he only gets one handcuff on. And Tracy Edwards hit him over the head with something and escapes, and he starts running. He's running down the street, and he flags down these cops, and he's like, hey, you have to get this handcuff off me. This guy just put me in handcuffs. He tried to kill me. So their key wouldn't work, so the police offered to escort him up to Jeffrey Dahmer's house, and they go up and they knock on the door and ask if they can come in. Jeffrey lets him in, and they want to go get the key. And the key is in Jeffrey Dahmer's bedroom. So they go in and they open a bedside drawer, next to the bed. And there is Polaroids of all his victims being dismembered in various stages of composition and weird positions, all kinds of nasty stuff. And once they realized that the photographs were real, they started looking around and they found the tub full of body parts and bones, meat, human meat in the freezer. I mean, all kinds of horrible things you could even imagine. And then they obviously arrest him, and they were able to identify, I believe, 16 of the victims through the photos. He goes to jail, and in jail, Dahmer is killed by another inmate who was a schizophrenic, who hid a knife under his bed and stabbed him along with another inmate. He killed the both of them. Dahmer was also, he was obsessed with the movie Exorcist 3. And if you ever seen Return of the Jedi, I think it is, or not Return of the Jedi, Revenge of the Sith maybe, where the one where Anakin turns into Darth Vader basically, and Palpatine makes him evil. He was obsessed with Emperor Palpatine because the characters in these movies were powerful, but they were evil. He was also diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, schizotypical personality disorder, and a psychotic disorder. Yeah, so the inmate that killed him was Christopher Scarver, and he had stabbed him and beaten him to death, I'm pretty sure. So that's pretty much summed up in the quickest video that I can give you guys. But on Tuesday, October 4th, I will be deep diving into Jeffrey Dahmer and all his victims and his whole case. And I'm going to have a special guest on. His name is Josh Hitchens. He wrote a play about Jeffrey Dahmer, and he starred in it himself. And I believe he starred as Jeffrey Dahmer, and he knows all things Dahmer, and he's going to help me present the case. He also wrote 2 books, Haunted History of Philadelphia and Haunted History of Delaware, so they'll be really cool ghost stories, hopefully, to kick off my Halloween spooky series. If you can't tell, I'm trying to get in the mood. You can see my skull sweater, but I will be dressing up in some Halloween costumes, so I hope to see you there on Tuesday, October 4th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Be there or be square. We're talking about all things Jeffrey Dahmer, and we're deep diving everything you need to know about the movie, about, you know, his whole case and story and victims, everything. So we'll go hard. Thank you for coming. Please like and subscribe to my videos. I really appreciate all your support. Thanks. Bye, guys.